I saw this video from a guy who has the same name as me, so let's watch it.
Well, turns out Mom was right. It really is that damn phone.
Do kids' parents know that the phone is bad for them? Is that, I mean, I guess that is true now, huh? Because parents are probably born, I mean, in the late 80s, and then they kind of saw this technology stuff happening now. And then, yeah, I mean, my parents were older, so my parents were born in the 50s and 60s, so they really don't understand phones at all. I mean, my parents are probably more brain rotted by their phones than me at this point.
There are videos going around on short-form platforms like Instagram Reels and TikTok, which have the sound of a bird singing with a caption that states something like, "What happened to this bird from my childhood?" And in the comment section, you have tons of teens or young adults.
Bro, am I the only one who started to think that maybe short form content is not the future that we all thought it was? I just feel like anytime I see short form content, I always get this feeling of I don't know anything about you after watching that. And I can watch dozens and dozens of those videos, and it still only amounted to me spending 24 minutes with you as a person. Whereas you watch one video of somebody making a 30-minute doc, or in this case a 10-minute doc, and that's worth 10 of those short form content spending time with that person. It really doesn't make me form a bond with people the way that I thought it would. I haven't found someone from short form content yet that has stuck with me in long term. In fact, the closest thing to that I can think of, and it's only because he eventually started making long form content, but Young Turd from Vine back in the day, that guy is someone who I still see videos of that I think, oh, I know that guy and that guy's cool.
Wondering the same thing. This is the sound of a mourning dove, and the real reason you don't hear it anymore goes far beyond
because you're not awake in the morning.
Initially think.
It's morning, actually. It's like a sad dove, not like a. Yeah, I know that sound.
I remember what it was like to wake up early on Saturday morning. The spontaneity of the day, not knowing what I'd get into or whether my mom had made plans for us, and the dependable cooing.
I don't know if I was ever like a get up early kind of person. When I was younger, I would still stay up way too late. I was a kid who was on the computer. There was a big square screen in the family office, and I would go there and sit in front of it and play whatever MMO that would run on that piece of shit that I could, and I would sleep in until 10, 11 o'clock on Saturdays. I can't believe that I made it through school being the person that I was, because I was always staying up way later than I should be staying up, and we had to get up at 6 in the morning to go to school. My school started at 7:18 in the morning. How in the world did I do that? I was just miserable. No wonder I was depressed.
Of the mourning dove that never failed to perch itself outside of my window. It doesn't make much sense that I wouldn't hear the sound of this dove in the present day. After all, I still wake up near my window, and it's not like they've gone extinct. So there must be something else we're all missing. What I really think it is a certain essence within childhood that we managed to lose by becoming increasingly more wired in.
Now, I do think there's something behind that. I have noticed that the more that you are on your phone, just the more distracted and pulled into that world that you are. The digital world is not the real world, and I know this is rich coming from someone like me who's right here, right now, making videos on the internet. But in general, I do like to be out in the real world. I spend a lot of my time there. Every day I'm out doing things. I go and see my family. I work. I'm out in the world talking to people. I spark up conversations. That's the kind of person that I am. And I know a lot of people are afraid to do that. I'm at the gym and no one will make eye contact. You look at people and they look away from you immediately. No one wants to talk to you. I love to make little comments to people. It's just like, damn, you looking big. Just out of nowhere. And they go, huh? That's my favorite reaction to get out of someone. And then I just go, man. I just walk away.
How about now? You still wired in?
Oh
there was a
God.
playground primarily made
I love standing next to you, dude. You make me look so tough. That's a good movie.
out of wood within walking distance of where I grew up, right next to a church. But that walk took what felt like eons. Along the way there, I occasionally stopped by a tree on my street's island that I always used to climb up, appropriately named the climbing tree. Trying to get to the top was always a difficult mission, but a mission I was never able to complete. So instead, I tried to impress one of my parents by hanging on a trunk or positioning my body upside down.
This guy definitely gets out of the house. You can tell by the muscle definition that he gets out of the house. I don't know, man. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I think all of the complaints that people have about the phones and everything sort of seem silly to me. I do think that they are sort of taking over people's brains and all of that, but that's because we let them. There's a thing that I think about a lot, and it's because I have sort of an addictive personality. Everything in my life, from caffeine to nicotine to video games to my phone, I have to be careful with those things. I can't let them take a hold of me too hard because they will just consume me. So I am somebody who regulates the things that I do really well. I know how many Zins I use a day. I know how much caffeine I drink every day. I know when it's time for me to play video games and when it's not. I know how much I can be on my phone, and I check my screen time. Those things are really important. There is this weird thing that people do who just maybe don't have that same struggle, or maybe tell themselves they don't have that same struggle, where they go, I like this thing. I'm just going to use it as much as I want to. And that's a problem with things like your phone, because it's literally made for you to never get tired of it, for it to continuously give you dopamine rewards so that you will just sit there and stay on it forever. And a lot of times we come from worlds where you think, oh, I'll get tired of this eventually. And that happens with video games, with television, with books, all those things. Usually you have a threshold that you'll reach, and you'll put it down because it's so, at least the older versions of these things were so taxing on you that eventually you would have to take a break from it. And that's true of video games from bygone eras. That's true of TV from bygone eras. But now things are being made more like a slot machine, in the way that they've seen that if every time you pull it, you win, if every time it's good, then you will get bored of it. That's what brains do. You know what's going to happen. So the variance of you getting something that's good is so limited that you keep going. And it's so randomized that it could happen 4 times in a row, and then it doesn't happen for a long time. And they constantly have these huge data sets of people and how long they're staying on here. You right now watching this video are being tracked by YouTube, and they're telling me how long on average you guys are staying here to watch these videos, to try to get me to make my content in a way that you will stick here longer. And they tell me how long on average the most popular videos that are the same length of time as this video people stick around for. So maybe try to get them to stick around for that time. Here's the exact minute when they started falling off. Maybe you should have put something more interesting here. Maybe this is why they left. Here, watch this little clip of your video at the exact time that the majority of people are tuning out who did tune out at this. It's so interesting the way that we are all being monitored to keep us on these things. And they're even trying to get me to program this stuff so that you stick around as long as possible. And I don't think that that's bad. I want you to watch my content. I want to form this connection with you. But if you're someone who's going through your day just saying, oh, I can trust my subconscious to regulate this for me, maybe if you're feeling like there's some kind of negative thing going on, it's time for you to start checking in to see if you need to consciously take steps to limit how much time you're spending doing these things.
When I had finished abusing the tree without harming any of its foundation, I'd start again on my path towards the wooden playground. And my next biggest task was getting through the 30 seconds of death. It didn't inherit this name until I became a young teenager, but this inescapable 30-second stretch of sidewalk had an ominous feel to it, produced by these skinny, leafless branches that curved above your head and creaked like an old door that needed some WD-40. A friend of mine who used to walk to my house several days a week would often have to brace this path at night when the streets were desolate.
I was thinking about this earlier today, about how back in the day, in order to do anything and to get anything, you had to go do something. Renting movies back in the day, we all have such fond memories of that, at least those of us who remember video stores, because it was an experience to go out and go to a store and see this whole thing that was set up, and it happened in the real world, and it was so compelling because of that. And over the years, we've digitized this act, this place that we would all go to. And maybe you'd see people you know, maybe you got to know the clerks who worked there, you knew where the different sections were. It was a physical place that you could be in. And nowadays, that's turned into Netflix or Hulu or HBO or whatever. But back then, it was something to do, and that's that way with everything. I said everything from movies to sex has been digitized to the point that you can get it without leaving your bed. And humans by nature just take the path of least resistance on things. That's what our brains have evolved to do because that's what keeps you alive in life. And because of that, now we don't do anything. And since we don't do anything, we don't have any experiences, so we just have these plagues of fog on us.
which eventually gave him the inspiration to coin the path's name. And I too would always quicken my pace during this harmless but shiver-inducing expanse.
And I don't know that kids see the world like this anymore. This section is called How Children See the World, and he's talking about these adventures that you would go on, this really clear plotted out pathway in your brain. And I don't know if children see the world that way anymore. I think a lot of kids are spending a lot of their time inside doing things. And maybe that's not true. Maybe they are still going out and playing and doing all those things. But when you're a kid, at least for me, I remember this. I remember going out and trick-or-treating and how exciting that was for me. I remember playing track down with my friends in the neighborhood. I remember going out at gym time and playing kickball, and it was just such a real adventure, the being alive.
Even as a kid, and I wasn't too sure why I was doing it. Branches, buildings, cracked sidewalks, cars buzzing by, and curbs to try balancing on. The walk to this playground was anything but boring. And when I finally made it to the playground, my curiosity and excitement would begin to peak. What you might notice about this part of my childhood is how much imagery I was able to conjure up through something as simple as a short walk.
Yeah.
And you might be inclined to think that I'm able to recall these memories in this manner.
When I was a kid, I would go out to, there was the house that I lived in right next door, there was a house that had a lot of yard, and there were these big trees all growing in that yard. So it was just this big flat piece of land, and there was a big hill that went up to the house that this land was attached to. And on that land, there were just these big trees. And I would go and just play around those trees and just imagine stuff in my head. Whatever cartoons I was watching at the time, I would live inside of those, and I would make up plot lines in my head of me doing things inside of those cartoons as if I was the characters that I was watching. And I remember making up those kinds of stories in my head for years and years. Even into my teen years, I would be in my room or have downtime, and I would just imagine plot lines for stories. And as I got older and older, and especially as I started consuming more and more content, that stuff sort of slipped away from me because I never had to sit around and be bored anymore. I can't remember the last time that I was bored. And some of that is from adulthood of just being super busy all the time, but also some of that is just ready access to something that can absolutely distract you from anything that you're dealing with.
Because I was a kid,
our
and
phones.
the way I described things is the way that kids see the world. Without little to any predispositions about the world and how it works, children carry with them this sense of play, awe, and wonder with almost everything they come in contact with. I didn't see a tree planted on an island in the middle of the road on my street. I saw a multi-layered climbing platform with a towering peak I had to reach. But even though I saw it as that, it could have transformed into anything that fit the style of game I was trying to play.
Yeah,
you see,
totally.
as soon as you label something, you constrain that thing to what you know to be true about its label. And unless the object changes in some drastic way, and what you know about the object is proven to be untrue, it will always have that constraint that ties down any other possibilities.
And this is part of what I've said in the past about becoming an adult. The older you get and the more experiences that you have in the world, your lack of knowledge is replaced by knowledge. So when you're a kid, especially when you become a teenager and when you become 18 and you move out of your parents' house and you get out into the world, you have all these ideas of what could be the world. You've seen all these pieces of media depicting different things, and you assume that it's going to be one certain way. And the more time that you actually spend living in the world, the more you sort of start to pin it down as what it actually is in your brain. And because you do that, it's really hard for you to think of what it could be. So you never sort of break these molds that you've already put together. The life goes from being, well, maybe I can be this person who travels the world and makes these cool videos and lives in a tiny home and goes, on these long trekking trips, or maybe I can be this person who lives in a place where there's bullet trains and all this cool stuff that I've never experienced, and I can put myself, and you start pinning it down to, well, life actually is me waking up and going to this job, and that's just what life is. And that sucks a lot of the pleasure out of all of it. We definitely have a tendency to put ourselves in these these boxes. And I'm a believer that the sooner that you go and sit yourself down in a box, the worse your life is going to be. The longer you hold out, the longer you wait for something fantastic to happen, the better things are, because I imagine that there's all these little cubes all in a room, right? And you go and step into one of those cubes and you say, okay, this is the cube I'm going to live in. Well, as you live in this cube, outside of that cube, all the other cubes start to disappear and change, and new ones pop up, and old ones go away, and bigger cubes come, and smaller cubes come, and different cubes come, and you're just in this one cube, and you have no idea that all of these opportunities around you are now changing and doing all these things. This is why I always recommend to people that if you've been doing one thing for a really long time and you think that that's what life is, you should step out of that, maybe quit your job, maybe stop doing this one hobby and try something else out, because there's so much new stuff popping up all over the place, at all times, that you never know what's going to happen. Maybe a climbing gym opened up in your town that wasn't there before. Maybe you've a new skate park opened up. Maybe there's a huge BMX club that just came through. Maybe Yu-Gi-Oh cards have gotten really popular again. All these different things can constantly change in the world around you. And if you spend all of your time just staring at one thing, you'll never realize that all these things that you wished would have been happening, and you just haven't been paying attention.
I think this is what much of the content we see on our phones unconsciously gets us to do. The online world is an act of consumption. It's a process of a video or image or tweet trying to tell you how the world works without figuring out what it's really like out there yourself. But the world outside is a world of creation. You are the one interacting and experimenting with it and trying to figure out what that thing is yourself.
And it didn't used to be like this. The online world didn't used to be a world of consumption. It used to be a world of creation. This is a really perturbing thing that has happened over the past couple of decades. If you've ever watched The Matrix, when there's that scene early on in The Matrix where Neo is in his room and the screen says, "Wake up, Neo." And he gets up and he sees that it's, follow the white rabbit, and then the screen turns off and there's a knock at his door, and he goes outside and there's the girl with the white rabbit tattoo, and so he goes to that rave and all. That's what the internet used to feel like, is that you were constantly stumbling on this stuff that absolutely blew your mind. And I don't know if it's because now we've experienced too much of it, or because of the safe little rooms that we've all been put into because of the terms of service of different sites and how it's not the Wild West out here anymore. But the sense of discovery online has really gone away in a lot of places, and it's super unfortunate. I miss the old internet so much, to the point that there's a I can't remember what that site is, but there's a site that's basically geo sites from back in the day, but it's modernized, and you can just scroll for hours and find these little odd cubes of the internet. Let me see if I can pull this site up real quick. This is the worst search I've ever done in my life. Neo Cities, that's what it's called. Look, I found it immediately. So this is the way the old internet was. Look at this. Let's click on another one. This is what the old internet used to be like. You would go through and you would find these really bizarre things that don't make any sense to be here, but it's just this long project that someone has embarked on to do something that's important to them. And you had to put in so much work to make something like this. This doesn't just come together. There is no template for this. You have to write HTML. You have to make graphics or find graphics. You have to learn how to put this stuff together in a way that makes you feel something. And that is what the old internet was. It was effort. It was painful to do, but it made you understand what was going on with other people much more than the modern social media does. The modern social media is a whitewashed excuse for what the internet was supposed to be. And it's the saddest thing for someone like me who absolutely loved growing up on the internet as a kid.
The more content we consume on a regular basis, the more notions, beliefs, and labels we add on top of everything we see. It becomes purely material, mechanical, and incapable of anything other than what our predispositions make us see it as.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most
Exactly.
destructive effects of overconsumption. Your curiosity, fueled by positive boredom, gets destroyed.
Yep.
Nothing is boring to the child because the child can turn anything boring into an experiment. A child is okay with not knowing because they aren't yet told by their parents, peers,
Yeah.
and society that you should seek to stimulate yourself through study and consumption. And they likely haven't been punished enough for exploring and experimenting to lose that ability to see things
Man, I remember being a kid and just taking things that I had found outside and putting them in a bucket of water to see what would happen. Just combinations of different things. I remember one time I put so much stuff into a bucket of water and it made like pancake batter. And my brother wanted to know how I did that because he just thought that looked so weird and interesting that I was like, I don't know. I have no idea what I did. I just put a bunch of stuff in here and it turned into this pancake batter like consistency.
through a unique imaginative lens. This is part of the reason I think we're unable to perceive the sounds of the mourning doves anymore. Our brain, through enough conditioning, has labeled the mourning dove as unimportant to our daily monotonous routine
totally.
of going to work, studying, hitting the gym, or scrolling endlessly. And
Yeah.
so, unlike how a kid is able to perceive different objects in our environment as imaginative forms of play,
And there's so much of that in my life too. The routine is so important for me to be able to exist in the world. I was thinking today about how in order to really thrive in modern times, you have to exist in this hyper actualized, really motivated, super proficient way. And a lot of people are having a hard time out of there because they're existing in a sort of twisted up, doing drugs, experimentation, living however they feel like in the moment kind of life that would have worked completely fine 200 years ago when people were mostly always drunk and it just sort of waking up at 4 a.m. and then going out and doing chores and coming back in and going to sleep for a while and then getting back up and doing more work around the house and in the farm and feeding themselves and hunting and just sort of living in a way that just provided for their immediate needs. They didn't have to try to understand that, oh, in 2 weeks I have this bill that needs paid, so I have to make sure that I'm doing this thing so that I can have this much money to pay that bill then, and then I need to put the... That's all something that takes so much brain power while also doing all of these other things that it really it makes you have to it makes you have to become efficient. And efficiency gets rid of things that are frivolous. And the frivolous things are the things that give you the most joy. So when you're out there just constantly trying to succeed and thrive, I mean, you're really sacrificing a big part of your humanity. This goal-driven, moving forward, always trying to push thing that we all do, that I do, I'm not trying to exclude myself from this, is definitely robbing us of something that it means to be human. It means to be part of this world, an animal. That's what humans are, and we're making ourselves the least animal thing that we possibly can by doing this.
even though that might not represent the real function or usage of that object, we only judge things by how useful or stimulating we initially perceive them to be. In other words, to us, the mourning dove is just an insignificant bird, but to kids, it's this strange otherworldly being that we're able to sustain our sense of wonder around. and that makes it fascinating enough to be perceived.
Yeah.
After experiencing more feelings of adventure in 10 minutes than you've probably experienced in the past 3 years, I finally arrived at the playground. My feet dragged in the wood chips before I fully adjusted to the new terrain. I hopped up on the climber and began making my way to the slide. Then I grabbed the top of the interior of the slide and used the momentum built up.
Do you guys remember sliding down a metal slide as a kid and it being just as hot as any frying pan that you would have ever have touched and just having your back be on fire? I used to hate going down metal slides because of how painful it was.
From swaying to catapult myself down to the end. No intrusive thoughts entered my mind. I was fully immersed in the present moment. And that feeling of imaginative play can rarely or ever get produced by the endless feeds of social media on your phone. But perhaps what fascinated me the most about this playground was the sandbox. In a sandbox, there are no rules. It's up to you to create whatever you possibly could.
Sandboxes are low-key kind of disgusting, though. Think about how many animals drop in there. Think about how many kids have ran their filthy little hands over all that sand. This is so gross.
With materials you're provided. And I believe a sandbox and the lack of perception of the mourning dove are intimately intertwined. Previous conceptions...
This guy's on something, by the way. I don't know if he's on to something, but he's definitely on something. This whole thought process is really amazing to me.
Of a sandbox don't really matter. You can know a sandbox is made of sand, but you don't have to follow a set of guidelines in order to make something that can be considered valuable.
Totally. And I think that that's something that's really important about art and creativity that still attaches me back to my inner child. And I think about that a lot whenever I'm playing music. And when I talked about the other day about how I can't give up music, and I've tried, but it does something really important for me. But just sitting down and holding this instrument and just whacking away at it and finding something that I don't have an idea. I'm not trying to do anything, but something comes out of it. Do you guys remember when you were young and you would pop out a piece of Play-Doh and you would just start rolling it between your hands, and who knew what you were going to make with it? Definitely not you, but by the end of it, you had made something. And it might not be something that the people around you would swoon over and fawn over, but it's a direct interpretation into the physical world of what's going on inside of you at that moment. And you don't even realize that that's what's happening, but it is. When you're playing an instrument, it is a translation of the chaos or the peace or the joy or whatever that's going on in your head, and you'll stumble across stuff that attaches to you in that way, that is a part of you. It's very good for you.
What mattered was that you constructed something that nobody else could replicate and satisfied the enjoyment of the moment. Each of these parts of my creations in the sandbox were made of smaller subparts I had to form an explanation for in my head. I was by no means an expert at sandboxing, but that isn't what made it worth looking at and listening about. What made it worth it was the fact that I had alchemized something that had once only existed in my head and created an entirely new world with its own set of systems and properties. What's that, Cole? My mom asked.
And that's what, when you were playing, back in the day, you would come up with these rules as you needed them to be come up with. How many times do you remember playing with your friends and that cliche thing that kids do where, oh, I got you. No, you didn't. I'm wearing the bulletproof vest right now, and the bulletproof vest protects me from you getting me like that. You have to get me this other way. And you just sort of form this new invention in your head that's coming up with games and making playtime. And instead of trying to learn the rules of something else, you're trying to make the rules yourself. And over time, we squeeze that out of ourselves because it doesn't do anything in the real world for us. At least in aggregate, it doesn't. If the majority of times that you try to do that, it won't help you. So you deem it as useless and you stop doing it.
I responded with, "This is the lair of an old man that attacks the village of Skaba." My mom chuckled, but gave me the space.
This guy's making all of this up.
This old guy, he torments the people in the village by stealing their eyebrows, and the only way they can escape is by hiding in this tunnel I built. Coming up with this kind of stuff is really only possible when you go through the process of deconstructing the world around you and taking the bits and pieces and reforming them in an unconventional way. In the sandbox, I was chasing novelty through deconstruction and creation. And I honestly think that's what a lot of us are chasing on social media, but in a much less interactive way.
I've had conversations with people in the past about how the term consumer is so inflammatory, but it describes a lot of people really well. And you can see that as people consume more and more, they start to get bored of consuming and they eventually want to start creating. And it's really, it's hard to watch sometimes when you see somebody who is very unpracticed at creating, trying to take their first steps out in front of everybody, and you have this tendency to go, oh, look at how embarrassing that is, or look at how bad that is, but they're doing the best they can for their first few times. You got to think, a lot of people grew up feeling very much so like they didn't have anything worth offering to the world, so they didn't try a whole lot, and they got beat down so much, and they had this, they just gave up in a certain kind of way. And as they get older and they see more and more people creating around them, it makes them feel like they can do it. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a really good song, and that's what makes me make music that day, because I just think, this song is, I could do this. So then I go and do it, because when someone's really good at something, it makes you feel like that you can do it as well. And the effect of social media on people is that you're constantly seeing a stream of content that is so well done, because there's so many people out here that are so talented, that you start to feel like, oh, I can make content as well. I can make something that makes people feel the way that I do right now. And that's a good thing that social media does. But the thing that is difficult to learn for a lot of people is the practice of it, and getting better at it, and actually learning how to get what's inside of you out. How many of us have stumbled across some kind of video on the internet of someone playing a song, and it's just it's not bad. It's very hard to make bad music nowadays. Hats off to people who actually make bad music nowadays, because that's a difficult thing to do in this world where you can basically download a beat and use AI to sing on a song for you and write all the lyrics and do all these other things. But it's just not inspired. It doesn't feel like that spark is there. And you know what I mean. If you have a song that you really like, that really makes you feel something, if you're someone who listens to music, if you watch movies, if you read books, when you stumble across a really good one, it's not just, yeah, that's good. It's, whoa, this is amazing. And whenever you stumble across someone online who's just, yeah, there's nothing bad, but it's not doing that thing for me, that's a really interesting place to be, and it's a really interesting place to look at. Go and look at those comments. People are either super mean, or they're just saying things like, keep going. And I hate that phrase. Keep going, dude. Keep going.
People crave the novelty they once
Thanks, man. I needed you to tell me that I could keep going. That's what I was waiting for.
Reframes the way they see something and breaks the rules, or does the opposite of what every other creator is doing. It induces a feeling in ourselves that we haven't experienced since we were a kid on the playground.
And I often think about that, the breaking rules and doing something that's different from what every creator is doing. Sometimes when I start to dive too deeply into the meta of what's going on here, when I start to talk about the way that lets you guys in on the secrets a little bit of what all's going on, and I talk a little bit too much about all the lighting that I'm doing, or all the skills that I've had to build, or the different pieces of software that I'm using to make this whole thing happen, it does start to feel wrong. Like I shouldn't be doing this. Other people don't talk about this. This isn't what people want to hear about. People want to be kept in this illusion. But to me, some of the things that are really interesting are the things like breaking this fourth wall. And I mean, you look at what I'm doing right now. Look at the type of video that I'm making. I'm having a conversation directly with you, with the person watching it right now. And this isn't the type of video that you could go out and show to a friend and have them really go, whoa, that's so cool, dude, that's so funny. That's not what we're doing here. We're doing this sort of weird, I'm talking to you and you're listening and we're having a conversation, but you're not really getting to talk back to me. I'm talking, we're watching this video together and I'm having thoughts about it and you're being subjected to those. And when I talk about those things, I feel ooh, this is a little dicey. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this.
Problem with viewing these content anomalies all the time is that this content we're consuming was not by our own doing. We are not the ones
Yeah.
removing our preconceived ideas and notions, deconstructing the world around us, and
That's
molding
so
it
true.
into our own creation.
Yeah, so many times you have to be so careful. You have to be so careful when you're consuming other people's content, because you will start to intake ideas and you will start to be convinced of them. Have you ever watched something and you've thought, that guy is cool, I'm just going to believe what he believes? And maybe that's a subconscious thing that you do, but if you don't think about whether or not what he's saying is right, if you didn't come up with that thought on your own, then you are inheriting it from him. I did this recently when I was watching the first season of True Detective, and Russ Cole in that episode in that season had so many interesting thoughts to me that I found myself just adopting these thoughts without second thought. But you don't even think about the life that a person like that would have, and whether or not you want that life. You just think, well, that sounds good, I'm going to think that now.
We are just consuming someone
And
else's.
especially with social media nowadays, where you're just flicking up and down. You're not even searching for anything. You're not even vetting the content. You're just putting it into your brain and letting it go in there.
Process of doing that. And I believe that's holding back not only your creative potential, but also your contentment with your daily life. Within each of us is this inner world of play, awe, and imagination that is separate
Totally.
from what everyone else's inner world looks like. And you can tap into that again, just like when you were a kid,
Yeah.
when you remove your tendency to conform. And you do that by removing the habit of over-consuming. The truth is, you still have access.
Yes, I do agree with that. There is a thing that happens where you will see in comment sections how most people will trend towards whatever the most popular opinion is. You sort of decide what is correct by what everyone around you thinks is correct. But the truth is that most people aren't right about things. They just aren't. I mean, think about how many people think the earth is flat, and these are things that are super provable and obvious, and they're just wrong about them. And if you're not careful, you'll stumble into a circle of people who have these opinions about, maybe they're alt-right people who are borderline white supremacists, and you sort of get dragged into this idea of thinking this way is the right way, and then you become something like that without even realizing that you're becoming that. Evolution is a slow process, and you have to orient yourself towards the thing that you want to go to, because if you just let the world take you wherever it wants you to go, you're at the mercy of algorithms and social media and just all of these weird things that sort of tap into your tendencies and then go, what box is most profitable for us to put them in right now?
Access to everything in your mind and reality that you had as a kid, but with even greater potential. You're probably at the very least 13 or 14 years old watching this video with a larger brain and more ways to utilize it.
Yeah.
So disconnect for a while each day. Remove any preconceived notions about what you see out in front of you and what you're feeling in this moment. Reconnect with that sense of childlike wonder that you lost somewhere along the way. Deconstruct the world around you and view it as a massive playground full of different ways of interacting and tinkering with its elements to create something that makes this sandbox game of life more enjoyable.
Yeah.
Sit with this world, observe the way it works, and use the ways you've experimented with real life to draw your own conclusions about the truth behind things, and realize how often those truths are subject to change. Then compare that with what you're being told online and refine the construction of reality to produce better results for yourself and others. Life didn't stop.
He's got a really good way of looking at this, because it is true. You need to, at some point in time, break away from this idea that somebody else is going to hand you the thing that's going to make your life what you want it to be. No one else can understand that. You probably haven't even properly conceptualized what that thing is yet. You don't really know and can't imagine the kind of life that is actually possible for you, and it's there. You're an amazing thing. The fact that we're here and all these cells have come together to create somebody who has an ability to perceive what is going on and have thoughts about it that are so elaborate that you can create societies and rules and facts and figures, and it's amazing. It's such a disservice to yourself to pigeonhole yourself to what other people's ideas of what you should be are.
Stop being an experiment when you stop being a kid. You just forgot where you placed your test tubes and beakers. And when you've done this for long enough, and you can be curious enough to ask why and find your own answers, you might just find that your ears start to perceive the sound of the mourning dove once again. I appreciate you guys listening to my ideas and life experiences as always. And if you want to talk to people who are on a similar path, who are curious, who are trying to learn more about the world and get advice and get more resources about how life works, then check out my free self-improvement community. The link is in the description. If you're going to spend time online, you might as well spend it doing something that actually promotes growth and leads to the betterment of your life. So check out that community. It's completely free. Link in the description. Usually this is where I tell you to go watch another one of my videos and plug it here, but I'm not going to do that because that would be very hypocritical of this video. So yeah, go do something. Go do something fun. Have some play, and I will talk to you guys soon.
That was a cool video. Well, there's one of mine. Cool. That was a cool video. Give it a like. Subscribe to Cole Hastings. That was kind of cool. I'm a little put off by people who have these self-improvement things, but some of these people are really good, and for all I know, he could be one of them. But in general, I also want to say thank you for having this conversation with me. I appreciate it so much. This is a strange way to end this video, but it's something that's kind of been on my mind lately. I've been getting a lot of comments over the last few videos that I've been making, and some of them are extremely agreeable with me, and some of them are kind of abrasive and coming from a place of what I would consider to be a superiority complex. But in general, I appreciate all of it. I appreciate that you guys are taking the time out of your busy days to listen to me talk to you, and then you're taking even more time to have a thought of your own and build the conversation with me. And I know that I'm not responding to every single comment. I have only limited amount of time in my life, and I spend as much of that time as I can doing this thing, which is making the video. So I'm sort of responding to it here. Whenever I'm making a new video, you've got to think that my thoughts are informed by the things that you've been talking to me about. I see most of those comments, maybe even all of them, and they affect me, and I think about them, and I bring them into this process with me, and so I just appreciate it. I'm thankful for you guys being here, and yeah, I'm glad to be able to do this.